Good day, everybody. I hope that you're well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 8 English lesson on author's purpose and tone. So, we'll be doing our grade 8 English lesson on author's purpose and tone. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once we've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of language arts, grade 8, then we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of author's purpose and tone. So our chapter is author's purpose and tone. The subject is English language arts, grade 8. And the lessons that we're going to be focusing on under the chapter of author's purpose and tone is to identify author's purpose, which sentence is more formal, and to identify appeals to ethos, pathos, as well as logos in advertisement. All right, so we are doing our tutorial lesson on aplusstudents.ca. So we're going to start with author's purpose, right? So an author's purpose is what he or she hopes to accomplish with a given text. So you can determine an author's purpose by just looking at the type of words, phrases, or even sentences that an author chooses to include in his text. So when authors write, to persuade, they often state their arguments or their positions directly, and they provide evidence to support these positions. So they may state their position, which, like with words, right? So they may state the position with words like should, must, best, or worst. And they may include a call to action, such as contact your local representative today. So when an author writes to inform, right, then they often provide facts, definitions, and examples, right, as well as details about the history of a specific topic that they are writing about. And when the authors write to explain, then they often break down a concept or process into smaller parts or into smaller steps. And then also when authors try to describe, then they often use sensory details to tell what something either looks like, what it sounds like, or what it feels like. So that is how we also identify the author's purpose based on what the author does, right? Because the author, it hopes to accomplish, right? It's what he or she hopes to accomplish with a given text. So you can then determine an author's purpose by just looking at the type of words, phrases, sentences that an author chooses to include. And when an author writes to persuade, then they often state their arguments or they state their positions directly and they provide evidence to support these positions. And they may even state their position with words, right? Like should, must, best, or worst. And they may include a call to action. And when an author writes to inform, then they often provide facts, They provide definitions, they provide examples, and they provide details about the history of a topic. And when the author writes to inform, right, like we say, importantly, they write about facts, definitions, right, to give you the clear idea of what they are writing or what they hope to accomplish. They also provide the details as well as examples about the history of the specific topic. And when they write to explain, then they often break down a concept or the process into smaller parts or into smaller steps. And when the authors write to describe, then they often use sensory details to tell what something looks like, what something sounds like, or what something feels like. All right. So we made mention of how to identify the author's purpose, right? And we said that the author's purpose is what he or she, which is the author, hopes to accomplish with a given text. All right, so if we look at this text, right, it says, I become aware for the first time today of the immense silence in which I am lost. Not a silence so much as a stillness, for there are a few sounds, the creaks of some birds in a juniper tree, an eddy of wind which passes and fades like a sigh, the ticking of the watch on my wrist, slight noises which exaggerate my sense of the surroundings, overwhelming peace. If I look at the small device strapped on my wrist, the numbers, even the sweeping sound, even the sweeping second hand seem meaningless, almost ridiculous. No travelers, no campers, no wanderers have come to this part of the desert. Today, and for a few moments, I feel and realize that I am very much alone. And that is from Eddie Abbey, Desert Solitaire. Copyright 1968 by Eddie Abbey. Right? So now we need to basically say what the author suggests by this text. So if we say what the author suggests by this text, right? It's just him describing how he feels in the desert, in the wilderness, right? And we specifically say, when I specifically mentioned the word describe, because he basically um, gives a whole description of literally everything that he can see, that he can feel, right? It's like he's describing everything, even the sound of the watch on his wrist, the noises that he can hear, right? So it is to describe, he's basically describing how it feels to be in a desert wilderness. And lastly, it feels alone. Like he feels like he's alone. So as much as he hears things around him and describes the sounds that he hears, but yet he feels alone. Or he realizes that he's very much alone, especially since he's aware of his surroundings. No sound of people, yet he can hear clearly all the other sounds of nature. So, also, when it comes to the text that we have just read, the author also includes a few sensory details, right? That he had encountered, or that he can hear, or that he could see, right? And he made sensory details like the creak of some birds, right? To basically give us an idea of the it gives us an idea or a way in which for us to imagine the scene. Because remember, based on how he describes it, it's as if we are picturing that we are there without us being there, just based on what we hear or based on what we read. So the author includes sensory details like the creak of some bird to help the reader imagine the scene, meaning it is outdoor. And the creak of some birds, right? This suggests that the author wants the readers to understand what the desert sounds and what the desert feels like after reading this text. And that is why specifically he is describing it. All right, here we have another one. It says, does your shampoo leave your hair dry or damaged, flat and lifeless? Then Organi Goo is a shampoo for you. Using only the finest organic ingredients, Organic Goo gives you stronger, shinier, healthier hair. Organic Goo's powerful, all natural formula penetrates the hair shaft to build strength, body, and shine. Every strand of hair is pampered and revitalized when you use Organic Goo. Are you ready for the best hair of your life? Then try Organic Goo today. And based on reading this text, right? This sounds more like an advertising text, right? It's like he's advertising the product, which is specifically shampoo, because he starts off by saying, does your shampoo leave your hair dry, damaged, right? Which means that this is shampoo that is being advertised, right? specifically named Organic Goo. And by advertising the specific product, right, it shows that the author is trying to persuade readers to buy the specific product. It's urging the readers to buy the product by describing it in detail, right? So your shampoo leaving your hair dry or damaged, which means that if I'm somebody who experience either dry or damaged hair, then I would definitely buy it. If I've sometimes feel my hair is flat and lifeless, then I would buy it. So it's basically describing it in manners in which it is persuading the readers to buy the specific product, which is called Organic Goo. And usually with advertisements, right, you need to persuade people to basically buy your product. So it's basically urging the readers to either buy or to at least try out the specific product, which is called Organic Goo shampoo. All right, let's go to our test. Right, so we're going to read a text and then we are going to basically give an idea of what we think the author is trying to tell us. It says, I become aware of the first time today of the immense silence in which I am lost. Not a silence so much as a stillness, but for there are a few sounds, which is the creak of some bird in a juniper tree, an eddy of wind which passes and fades like a sigh, and ticking of a watch on my wrist, slight noises which exaggerate my sense of the surrounding overwhelming peace. If I look at the small device strapped to my wrist, the numbers, even the sweeping second hand, seem meaningless, almost ridiculous. No travelers, no campers, no wanderers have come to this part of the desert before. Has come to this part of the desert today, and for a few moments I feel and realize that I am very much alone. And this is from Edward Abbey, named Desert Solitaire, 1968. So now we need to say what is the author's purpose, or which author's purpose is suggested by this text. So which author's purpose is suggested by this text? Is it to describe how it feels to be in a desert wilderness, or to convince readers that the desert is a beautiful place? So the author's purpose, which is being suggested right by this text, is to describe how it feels to be in the desert wilderness. You feel alone. You feel a stillness, not a stillness of it being quiet, but it is like peace, right? You hear the sound of the birds. So it's basically to describe how it feels to be in the desert wilderness. So by looking at that very same text, which best shows that the author's purpose is to describe how it feels to be in the desert wilderness? Is it the author includes sensory details like the creak of of some bird to help the reader imagine the scene, or the author uses formal language such as a small device? And which best shows that the author's purpose is to describe how it feels to be in the desert wilderness, right? The author mentions a few sounds, right? That he basically, let's say, hears. And hearing is to do with sense, right? It's to do with our sensory, right? And he mentions the creak of some bird in a juniper tree, right? An eddy of wind which passes and fades like a sigh, the ticking of my watch on my wrist, slight noises which exaggerate my sense of the surrounding overwhelming peace, which means that it is basically awakening his sensory details, right? Such as the author includes sensory details like the creak of the sound bird of some bird to help the reader imagine the scene. All right, so now we're going to read another text. It says, slouched at the corner table in a forgotten diner in a quiet part of town, Tommy Chan looks as if he just rolled out of bed. Chan, who is known as the difficult one in the boy band Momentum, is wearing a pair of heavily ripped jeans and a white t shirt. His black leather jacket looks as if it might have been run over by a bulldozer. A faded straw fedora is pulled low over his forehead, casting a shadow across brown eyes fringed with ridiculously thick eyelashes. We need to say which author's purpose is suggested by this text. Is it to convince reader that Tommy Chan is an important musician? Or is it describing Tommy Chan's appearance? All right, and the author's purpose is that's suggested by the text is to describe Tommy Chan's appearance, right? Because the first one says it to convince the reader that Tommy Chan is an important musician. The only thing they mention about the him being a musician, right, is the fact that he is a difficult one, is described as a difficult one in the boy band, right? However, it does not really convince the reader that he is of much important a musician, or more like it's just giving us a description of his appearance. And which best shows that the author's purpose is to describe Tommy Chan's appearance. So that very same text, right? Which best shows from the text that the author's purpose is to describe Tommy Chan's appearance. And usually, when they ask a question like this, then it means that you need to go back to the text, right? Because usually, certain words within the text will tell us. Is it the author informs reader that Tommy Chan is known as the difficult one in the band? or the author provides specific details like slouched at the corner table and heavily ripped jeans. And something that best shows that the author's purpose to describe his appearance is that he provides specific details, right? Like he mentions he slouches at the corner table and he's got a heavily ripped jeans. All right, let's go to the next one. It says, we are excited to tell all students about this year's fundraiser. Instead of asking you to sell magazines or candy, we are holding an online readathon. We can't do this without you. To meet our fundraising goal, or $5,000, we need all students to register online and create an account. Next, invite sponsors via email or social media. Sponsors can pledge a dollar amount for every hour they can read, or they can pledge a fixed amount. Improve your reading ability and support your school at the same time. Get started today. So now, which author's purpose is being suggested by this text? Is it to encourage students to take part in the fundraiser? Or is it to inform students about why the fundraiser is necessary? And based on the text, right, it is basically encouraging students to take part in the fundraiser, right? Because um, they are basically making mention of the fact that they're going to have a readathon online, right? And all students need to create an account and take part in the fundraiser. Now, that very same text, right, it says, which best shows that the author's purpose is to encourage students to take part in the fundraiser. So that is based on the text, right? Is it the author tells readers that we can't do this without you and asks them to get started today, or the author names a specific figure as a fundraising goal, 5,000 Rand? I think the best shows that the author's purpose is to encourage students to take part in the fundraiser is basically to tell readers that they can't do it without the students and that the students need to get started today, because they specifically also made mention that when students start today, they can also invite other sponsors via email and social media to take part in the readathon. All right. So that is basically how we identify the author's purpose when it comes to a text, right? So now we need to say which sentence is more formal. So formal writing is used for essays, business letters, as well as reports, right? And the following types of informal language should be avoided in formal writing. Remember, there's a difference between formal writing and informal writing. Usually, informal writing is when we are writing a letter to our friend, right? But the informal writings is now when it comes to us writing either emails, they're asking us to write essays, write business letters, or they're asking us to write a report or summary about something. So then there's certain words that you are going to have to avoid when writing a formal essay or formal letter or formal report or business letter or so on, right? So there's certain informal languages that you should avoid within the formal writing. So you need to avoid using slang. So you need to avoid using slang. You need to avoid using cool, awesome, right? Even idioms, right? Knock your socks off. These are all words that you can use when you are writing an informal letter. You need to avoid conversational language like gonna. I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna see you tomorrow. I kinda like the idea. This is examples. Yeah, you can come to my house next week. So you need to avoid using this kind of conversational language because remember, these are a conversational language that we use in a more informal way when we are talking to our friend. This is not the kind of language that you would use if you are either talking to, let's say, depending on the relationship that you have with your parent, but specifically your parent, maybe a teacher, maybe a principal, right? Even the president. Are you going to use this kind of language? You need to avoid abbreviated language like ASAP. Like, I want this ASAP, as soon as possible. FYI, for your information, like FYI, girl, you need to get that, right? So that is words like you need to avoid abbreviated language when you are writing informal, when you're writing a formal either essay, business letter, or report. You also need to avoid overly simple or imprecise languages. He got some stuff at the store. We need to avoid contractions. You need to write this full word. You cannot say can't. Needs to be cannot. Cannot say won't. Will not. You need to write it out in full. And contractions are not as informal as the other types, but they should be used sparingly in formal writing, which means that you cannot basically shorten every word that you are writing. That is why they're saying you need to use it sparingly. You cannot all the time say can't, won't, don't, and so on. You need to use it sparingly in informal writing because contractions can basically pass as an informal as not as an informal type of language. All right, so now we're going to compare the following sentences, right? The first one is informal and the second one is formal, and then we're going to basically compare it based on the writing. The first one, which is informal, right? It says, yeah, ostriches can't fly, but they are awesome runners. And if you can identify certain words that we specifically made mention of that you should not, that you should basically avoid writing informal writing. And the words that we specifically say that you should avoid is words like yeah, can't, there, awesome, right? And that is why they said the like certain contractions, right? It is not as informal as other types, but we should use it sparingly. Not all the time. Like you see in one sentence, you have can't and you have there. So you basically have two contractions in one sentence, and that actually makes it informal. All right, so now we compare to the formal way of writing. And it says, though ostriches are flightless, they are remarkably adept runners. You can even look at the way it is written, right? The tone in which it is written. So we need to avoid certain words when it comes to formal writing. And the words that we need to avoid, I have underlined those words. Avoid slang, avoid idioms, conversational language you have with your friends, abbreviated language, oversimple and imprecise language, and avoid contractions. Try to write the contraction out in full. And remember, you are going to be writing more and more and more formal languages, formal writings such as essays specifically, right? When you go to ninth grade, 10th grade, and so on. And especially if you go to the university, you are definitely going to write a lot of essays. And all of these essays are going to have to be formal writing. All right, let us quickly begin our test and just go over 2 or 3 of our sentences. So, which sentence is more formal? Olivia did not enter student politics until her junior year. Or Olivia didn't enter student politics until her junior year. We need to say which one is more formal. Olivia did not enter student politics until her junior year, or Olivia didn't enter student politics until her junior year. So the sentence that is a bit more formal, we can say it is Olivia did not enter student politics. Because can you see the contractions did not, she did not, the contraction is informal. Didn't is informal, but it is written out in full, which is more formal. We need to say which sentence is more formal. Tomorrow's lunar eclipse promises to be an impressive sight. Or tomorrow's lunar eclipse is going to knock your socks off. So we need to say which is more formal. And the one that is more formal is the first one, right? Because the second one, it says knock you off your socks. Yes, you want to describe it. However, you are using idioms, right? Which is more informal. All right, and the last one, it says which sentence is more formal? The Students' Council requested that more lockers be installed immediately to accommodate the incoming freshman class. Or the Student Council requested that more lockers are installed ASAP to accommodate the incoming freshman class. So, which one is more formal? First option or the second option? And the sentence that is more formal would be the first one, right? Because remember, we said avoid abbreviated words like ASAP, FYI, right? So we need to avoid certain words. So, which means that the sentence that is more formal is the first option. All right. So that is basically the end of our lesson, right? We identified the author's purpose, right? And the author's purpose is basically what the author is trying to tell us within his text. And sometimes an author describes certain events within the text to give us a clear idea of the mode or the mood of what he or she is basically trying to tell us. And then we also mentioned the informal and formal languages, right? Formal writing. And usually with formal writing, such as essays, business letters, right? There's certain things that you need to avoid, and you need to avoid abbreviated words, shortened words, avoid contractions. You need to avoid idioms, avoid informal language, conversational language, right? These are the things that you need to avoid when you are writing more formal writing. All right, so this is now the end of our lesson on author's purpose as well as tone. Thank you very much, grade 8, for joining the class, and I really hope you're going to have a good day further. Goodbye.